Hineni, here I am, said Abraham in our first reading from Genesis, and many prophets after him have used that word in responding to God calling their name. I want to talk about this Hebrew word, Hineni. It is made up of two little words, Hine, which means here, and Ani, which means I. And in English, we put that together to say the phrase, here I am. So when put together, it translates in that way. It's an ancient Hebrew word which is rich in meaning. Hine can be translated as behold, tells a people that an important announcement is to be made. The any bit, the second part of the word, proclaims, I'm at your service. Behold, I am at your service, it also implies. It's said by a number of people in the Old Testament, but it's also something that God says at particular times. Let's discover from this reading what our responsibilities are to our Creator and what his intentions toward us through this fascinating word are too. Several times in Genesis and Exodus and elsewhere, God asks, where are you? That question. He does so to Adam and Eve, as we know, in the Garden of Eden. He also does to Abraham, Moses, and others since. Understood literally, in many ways, the question doesn't make sense coming from God. Where are you? Well, surely God is all-knowing. God must know where they are. Perhaps the question isn't about geographical location. Perhaps instead, God is asking actually something quite different. On what or on whom are you focused? Where are you in your moral decision-making? The answer, Hineni, means, here I am, ready and waiting to do your will. Here I am, a partner with you. Here I am, how can I fulfill my role fully for you and with you? It indicates a receptive mind and an openness of soul. It declares readiness to engage, taking part in the unfolding of a people's history. It signals the moment when the details of my own life story become one with the story of our people. It stands for commitment to relationship. It's saying, I'm present and ready to live according to your values. It stands for being grateful for what we have between us. To say Hineni is to admit that I cannot be fully present without a community to say, wait for it, Hinenu, here we are. Indeed, as Christians, we, like the ancient Hebrews, are a communal people. Our individual efforts to accrue meaning gain purpose when we make them with others. We long to congregate, and we do at this time particularly, don't we? Where are you? I ask you that question. The Lord longs for us to respond to him as he asks that question too, to be near him, to place him at the centre of our lives, because it is God's deep desire for us to be in relationship with him and he with us. Sometimes it's necessary for some Christians to develop their faith from what they may have inherited as an institutional religion and develop and broaden into a personal relationship with God. Sometimes that's important for all of us at different stages of our spiritual journey. The question, where are you, is one that God continues to ask right up to today as he seeks us out to bring us into closer relationship with him. Well, the same was true for Abraham, and in this part of his journey, it would seem that God asks and calls Abraham to do something unthinkable: sacrifice his only son. It was a test that God sets And the reading from Genesis doesn't actually explain why God sets this particular test for him. So I can't answer the question, why does God ask him to do this? Don't know. Well, but maybe, perhaps it's because we're meant to focus more on how Abraham responds. And that may be helpful to us, because maybe we need to accept sometimes some things that come to us as a test. Some things are asked of us and we don't understand what they are and why they have come to us. Well, Abraham says, "Here I am." He does so without knowing what the Lord would ask of him. He answers, "Hineni," here I am. It's the first time this word is mentioned in the Hebrew Scriptures. Abraham and Isaac proceed to the place for the offering on Mount Moriah. Isaac calls out, "Father." Wanting to be present for his son's needs, Abraham again answers, using this word a second time, "Hineni," here I am. Abraham's faith appears to be going deeper, and when the boy asks where the sacrifice is, Abraham responds, "God will provide." Abraham goes ahead with God's request. Then one last time, once the sacrifice has been prepared and Abraham is about to go ahead and sacrifice his son, he readies himself, but then the angel calls out, "Abraham, Abraham." And for the third time, he responds, "Hineni," here I am. God mercifully shows him the ram that is caught in the bush over to one side, and it takes Isaac's place. The sacrifice is made. God's need to know, perhaps, about how deep Abraham's faith goes is answered. And then God provides. I honestly don't know why testing comes our way at times. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand and appreciate what God is up to. Maybe it is to test how deep faith goes in our lives at times. Sometimes what helps is to hold on to what has been promised to us from the Christian faith, in particular from the Scriptures. Abraham doesn't know, but the narrative tells us powerfully that he trusts unreservedly. What may help us, and certainly wasn't available to him at the time, is the written Scriptures and the promises that are contained within. Promises like one that comes from Psalm 37, verse 5. "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." Another one that comes to mind is from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't rely on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." A few weeks ago, we heard the words of Jesus, didn't we, just after his ascension, when he promises, "I am with you always, every day, to the end of the age." And elsewhere in the New Testament, St. Paul, when he's discussing all of this with the Corinthians in one of his letters, he says, "There is no testing that isn't common to everyone. God is faithful and will always provide a way through." I experienced this in my own life last year. During Lent, February and March, I was going through a pretty difficult time. I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, and tried as best I could to hold on to God and trust that he was with me. I woke up one morning though and did something I don't usually do, promise. I picked up my mobile phone and I looked at Twitter. And the tweet that was on the screen jumped out straight in towards me, and I had to acknowledge it. It was from a church leader that I follow on Twitter, and it said very, very simply, but profoundly, the only way out is through. It's actually what I needed to hear. In the end, the outcome was a positive one, but it gave me strength, that tweet, that although I didn't understand and appreciate ultimately what would happen, what would transpire, God saying that to me was a source of my strength. From the Genesis story, it illustrates powerfully how God makes himself available to us while longing to hear us say, Hineni, here I am, I'm here, I'm with you. In fact, he says it to us and is doing it all the time. It's important for us to appreciate that God not only wants us to be available to him, God always wants to be available to us. He is a personal God for each and every one of us. And like he did with Abraham, he wants us to believe wholly and trust fully in him, that he will provide. A biblical scholar who I read a lot often talks about complacent religion. I always find it sobering when I read that phrase, complacent religion. It means that we're very willing for God to provide. We like it when God provides for us in all kinds of ways. But we find it very difficult, the idea that our faith might be tested. That's difficult. It's uncomfortable. It makes things uncertain, and we don't like it. However, in looking at this story today, it makes clear that the entire episode of testing is set in the context of God's care and sustaining concern. As elsewhere in the Bible, God is with his people, guiding, protecting, providing. And even when we don't remember him, he still says, as he did to the people of Israel when they were in exile in Babylon, through Isaiah, Hineni, here I am. God is watching and waiting every day, calling our name, longing for our response. Hineni, here I am. And he's very ready and willing to provide all the resources of heaven for us because he is faithful. Amen. God bless you.